In the distance, a wild voice howled. "That's Garruk!" Will tilted his head as he tried to catch the direction of the cry. "Asking for Garruk's help didn't work out so well the last time. He said he was going to hunt down and kill Oko." She stared at him, mouth parted, then said, "He did. If the stag crosses the bridge, and why wouldn't it? Then the hunt has to cross the river, which means Oko has to cross the river, which means Garruk will have to cross the river. Find Garruk, and he'll lead us to the hunt." The traveling lantern hadn't broken during the altercation. When they reached the meadow, they no longer needed its light. A bloated moon, larger than any full moon Will had ever seen, cast so much light he could distinguish individual flowers in the meadow and trace the undulating wavelets of the river's current. The hunter stood knee-deep in the water, hands pressed to his head as his flesh throbbed with the unleashed corruption. The rot had escaped his veins and seemed to be devouring him from the inside out. Will said, "What if the shard was protecting him? What if he would have been better off if it had stayed in him? The curse is going to eat him alive." "We didn't know, and there's nothing we can do," said Rowan impatiently. "I am not sure how much longer he's going to live. If he can't follow the hunt, then we have to try. We have to save Father." She rode away toward the bridge, expecting Will to follow her. Of course, she was right. Yet a knot of anger and remorse dug up under his ribs like a spiky mace. Dark undines pushed against the current to remain close, waiting for a chance to drag Garruk under. The hunter sank to his knees in the shallows, roaring in agony as he struggled against the curse. A stronger set of ripples lapped the shoreline. The undines dove, vanishing. A beast the size of a cart lunged out of the deeper water in a spray that splashed all over in its armored black. It had at least 6 gaping mouths. The largest mouth clamped around Garruk, and it began dragging him into the current. The big man fought back, grappling with the beast as they rolled over and over in the shallows. Will dismounted and ran over, sword drawn. From the bridge, Rowan shouted after him, "Stop! It's no use. He'll kill you like he did Hale." What drove Will on, he could not have said. They needed Garruk to trace the hunt, but it was more than that. He felt a compulsion that might be as noble as honor, or as petty as self-reproach. A witch's hex might take hold of someone in this way, dragging them against their will into doing deeds they would later regret if they survived. Fleetingly, he wondered if Elwyn was right, if he and Rowan did have a witch's hex bound into their bones, but there was no time to think, only to act. He reached the shore just as Garruk wrestled the huge beast onto its back and snapped its spine with a pop that resounded in the night. Swinging around, Garruk spotted Will and his sword. Black blood leaked from cuts on his skin like pus draining from an infected wound. His teeth gleamed as he snarled, raising his bloody hands. "Garruk, it's me, Will Kenrith." Shadows pulsed under the hunter's flesh. His mouth worked, but no words came out. He flung himself at Will so fast, Will couldn't dodge, but Garruk wasn't after him. He snatched up his axe from where it lay in the grass, and with a shout, threw it toward the bridge. The axe head buried itself in the dirt at the foot of the obsidian span. For an instant, Will thought the hunter was attacking Rowan, who had a javelin in her hand as she tried to calm her frantic horse. Then he saw what Rowan had turned to confront. A monster, worse than anything they'd seen before, raced down the jet-black span toward her. It was a dark blue, almost black creature with 4 clawed arms and 4 taloned legs. A spine ridged with writhing tentacles, and an eyeless head whose hideous round maw was lined with perfect white sharp teeth. A 4-armed, tentacled howlback, just as Elwyn had warned. The creature leaped. Rowan cast her lightning into the javelin. But the beast's mouth gaped wide and swallowed the magic because that's what made its breed so much more dangerous than their clawed arms, taloned legs, and venomous grasping tentacles would already suggest. Will ran, although he knew he would be too late. The monster's tentacles lashed out, striking Rowan so hard she tumbled off her horse. The mare bolted. Rowan tried to roll out of the way of the monster as it lowered its maw and snuffled closer to her body. Garruk barreled into it from the side. The impact should have knocked the howl back over, but it was too big. Or maybe the curse had beaten all Garruk's efforts to fight it off. He staggered back, shaking himself, and grabbed his axe. He swung it, chopping off one of the monster's arms. A pulse of red lightning. Rowan's lightning! Shot back out of the maw to flash through the axe. Garruk stumbled back, sinking the haft of his weapon in the ground as the spell discharged into him, but did not topple him. The beast scuttled backward up the bridge. Garruk sprang after it, and with a powerful slash, cut off 2 more of its arms. Its tentacles lashed out, smashing him sideways into the stone balustrade. His head hit. He lost hold of the axe and slumped over the rails, an easy target. But the beast was already scuttling away across the span, fluid pumping with hisses of steam from the stumps of his arms. Garruk's body weight tipped him over the rail. He hit the river with a resounding splash, the spray sprinkling Will as he dashed to the river's bank. Tails flashing, the still waiting Undines vanished in pursuit of the unconscious man. Rowan screamed, "Will!" But he didn't stop. Blackwit Will, Muttonhead Will, so be it. Saving others when they were helpless is what his father would have done, no matter the circumstances. He plunged into the thick of the current, where the river bottom sloped steeply away from his feet. He inhaled and dove. The midwinter moon poured enchanted light as through glass into the river's translucent depths. The Undine swam a tightening whirlpool around Garruk, the force of their swimming pulling his body deeper, so even if he woke, he drowned before he could reach the surface. Will kicked with the strength he'd honed over summer swimming and diving in Glasstarn and the rivers of Ardenvale. His sword cut through water, sliced through the delicate merflesh. His slashes, slow but deadly. Merfolk blood trailed in ribbons as they thrashed away from his unexpected attack, diving deeper into a bottomless chasm. He still wore his riding gloves, so Will grasped hold of Garruk's wrist without fear of the writhing corruption. The hunter's weight pulled him down like stone. No bubbles of air popped from Garruk's lips. Was he even breathing? Was he already dead? Will's lungs were almost empty. Instinct urged him up. Let go. Save yourself. Get air. The sleek shapes of more Undines swam into view, circling him at a prudent distance. They would wait for him to drown. He refused to give up. He released his sword so he could pull with both hands. He kicked harder, casting his icy magic down the length of Garruk's body, hoping the ice would help him float. They rose, so slow, too slow. Dot spotted his vision, smearing into undulating blotches. He refused to believe it was too late. Above, a glamour of purplish light beckoned to him, a perfect circle spilling hope into the water. At first, he thought it was the moon, seen through the flowing water. But the shape was too large to be the moon, or perhaps he was hallucinating. Where the beams poured into the water and touched his body, their brilliance lifted him, as if with invisible hands, or maybe just with a kindling of persistence that he mustn't give up. He must keep striving. If he could reach the light, could breach the surface, they would survive. His lungs were going to burst. His vision faded in and out. He had no air left. His hands grasped a cold metal strut. His boots hammered into a freezing hard object that curved outward like a huge iron bowl. A final thrust of his leg, all he had left. Garruk's body rose past him, and with the last burst of energy remaining to him, he heaved the hunter's blackened, shriveled body over the lip of a cauldron so large the man fell inside. Will's head breached the surface, and he sucked in glorious air, then coughed until he vomited water. He clung to the legs of the vessel, most of his body still in the river, too exhausted to pull himself up. Just breathing. Breathing. The river pushed past him. As air settled in his lungs, he could see again. Impossibly, he was caught in the middle of the river as if beached on an unexpected shoal. Except the shoal was a cauldron whose rim lay even with the surface. Even holding on to its metal legs below the water, it was difficult to discern its shape beneath the constantly rippling movement of the water. The current roared past on either side so fast and loud he couldn't imagine swimming through it. The heads of a few undines popped up 20 paces away, where the waters eddied. They swam no closer, although they stared greedily at him with hungry eyes. A crystalline purple glamour pulsed in his face. Braced on one of the struts, he could see over the rim and into the interior of a cauldron with rocky, gem-like sides. Garrick lay curled inside, eyes closed, face slack. The corruption in his flesh twisted angrily through agonizing distortions, as if it were trying to penetrate the cauldron's gleaming bowl. With each pulse, the magic of the cauldron absorbed a patch of rot, and another, and another. Will could almost hear the darkness screaming as its stubborn tendrils were weeded inexorably out of Garrick's body. Whatever the curse was, it had met a more powerful magic. Or at least it had at long last come into contact with a force willing to consume and engulf it into its own shining structure. Vein by vein, the hunter's flesh cleared of the curse until he was nothing more than a silent corpse with matted hair and dirt-smeared skin. Dead, but free. Will wept, though he wasn't sure why. The waste of a man's life, the loss of Titus, his fear for his father. Had he done the wrong thing, bringing the hunter here instead of abandoning him and riding forward on his quest? A bass hum throbbed up out of the cauldron, its force so strong he felt it push at his body. He stiffened, wondering if he would have to plunge into the river and either drown or get torn apart by the ravenous undines. Worthy. The voice did not resonate in the air, but squeezed in his heart. All at once, light from inside the vessel burned so brightly it blinded him. The world went white, first hot and then cold. A searing pain stabbed into his side, passed through his body, and with a ghostly tremor, and vanished as if pulled out by unseen hands. He passed out. When he came to, he was stranded on a sandbar, half in the water with his legs rumbled by the streaming current, and half on its narrow strip of land with gravel digging into his chest. Where his fingers had dug into the gravel, the curved rim of a huge cauldron was just visible, hidden beneath an enchantment and surrounded by the heart river of the wilds. A voice lifted frantically from the distant shore. A voice lifted frantically from the distant shore, Rowan calling out to him. Will? Will? Can you hear me? Beside him, Garrick lay face down on the islet, arms flung out to either side, hands trailing in the water. With a groan, he rolled over and sat up.
Where am I? Who are you? No. I remember now. You're Will Kenrith.
He spoke in a voice with the growl of a hunter, but also changed. Quieter, calmer, introspective, and yet tense with caution. His chest and back bore many healed scars, some old and some fresh. But of the corrupting rot, the shadow curse, there was no trace.